The air inside the executive critical care suite at Helios Medical Spire did not smell like a hospital. It smelled clean, quiet, and expensive. Soft machines hummed in the background. The lights were dim but warm. Everything in the room had been designed to calm the mind and protect life. At the center of the room lay Park Seo-yoon. He was dying. Thin tubes ran from his arms and chest into machines that blinked and beeped in slow, steady rhythm. The heart monitor marked each second of his life with a soft sound, like a ticking clock that could not be stopped. His breathing was shallow. His skin looked pale and tight against his bones, nothing like the strong man he had once been. Only a few days ago, Seo-yoon had been feared across the city. His name alone could open doors or close them forever. He controlled the Korin Group, a powerful empire that touched shipping, nightlife, private security, and darker businesses no one spoke about openly. Politicians respected him. Criminals feared him. Executives obeyed him. Now he could barely move his fingers. Doctors had come from different countries to see him. Some arrived by private jet. Some stayed for hours, studying scans and test results in silence. Others spoke in low voices just outside the glass walls of the suite. No one argued anymore. The diagnosis was clear. Aggressive idiopathic cellular decay. It meant his body was destroying itself for no known reason. Cell by cell, organ by organ, his system was shutting down. There was no cure. No treatment that worked. No surgery that could fix it. They had tried everything. Nothing helped. The final estimate was cruel and simple. 2 days. Maybe less. The doctors had explained it carefully, using gentle words and calm faces. But the meaning was the same. Park Seo-yoon did not have much time left. Inside the room, Seo-yoon drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes his eyes opened, unfocused, as if he were trying to remember where he was. Other times, his face tightened in pain before relaxing again. His body was fighting a battle it could not win. Standing near the foot of the bed was his cousin, Park Dae-hyuk. Dae-hyuk looked calm. Too calm. He wore a dark, well-fitted suit that showed no wrinkles, as if he had never sat down. His hair was perfectly styled. His hands were folded neatly in front of him. Anyone watching would think he was the picture of loyalty and concern. He spoke softly to the nurses. He thanked the doctors for their efforts. He nodded at every update, no matter how grim. "We appreciate everything you've done," he said more than once. My cousin would be grateful. But behind his polite tone was careful control. Dae-hyuk understood what Seo-yoon's condition meant. If Seo-yoon died, the Korin Group would need a new leader. And Dae-hyuk was ready. The empire was already trembling. Executives were nervous. Managers waited for instructions that never came. Deals were delayed. Rivals watched closely, waiting for weakness. Everyone knew that when a king fell, chaos followed. Dae-hyuk made sure to be seen everywhere. He met quietly with senior staff. He reassured partners. He promised stability. "The company will not fall apart," he said calmly. "Seo-yoon built something strong. I will protect it." No one questioned him. After all, he was family. Inside the ICU, a senior doctor explained the latest results. There had been no improvement overnight. Seo-yoon's organs were continuing to fail, slowly but steadily. The doctor's voice remained professional, but his eyes showed defeat. "We will keep him comfortable," the doctor said. "That is all we can do now." Dae-hyuk nodded. "Please do." When the doctor left, the room grew quiet again. The machines kept humming. Seo-yoon's chest rose and fell with effort. Dae-hyuk stepped closer to the bed and looked down at his cousin. Seo-yoon's face was thin and tired. His lips were dry. His eyes were closed, but faint lines of tension rested between his brows, as if even sleep could not bring peace. For a moment, Dae-hyuk allowed his calm mask to slip. Not into anger. Not into fear. But into calculation. Everything was lining up perfectly. Doctors were helpless. Time was running out. The empire would soon need a new hand at the top. The board trusted him. The public saw him as the loyal cousin standing strong in a hard moment. Dae-hyuk straightened his jacket and returned to his composed posture just as a nurse re-entered the room. "Any change?" she asked quietly. He gave a sad smile. "No. But thank you for asking." The nurse nodded and moved to check the monitors. As she worked, Dae-hyuk looked once more at Park Seo-yoon, the man who had ruled the city, now trapped in a failing body. The king was fading. And someone else was already preparing to take the throne. The silence inside the executive critical care suite was suddenly broken. The sealed ICU door opened with a rough, untrained push, not the careful motion of medical staff. Heads turned at once. The sound did not belong in a place like this. A young woman stood in the doorway. She did not belong there. Her name was Mara. She looked thin, tired, and frightened. Her dress was plain and worn, clinging to her from sweat and dust. Her hair was pulled back without care, loose strands sticking to her face. In her right hand she held a clear plastic bottle half filled with water. The bottle shook slightly as her fingers trembled. For a brief second no one moved. Then everything happened at once. A nurse stepped forward quickly, her voice sharp with alarm. "You can't be in here. This area is restricted." Another nurse reached for the wall button to call security. Mara did not answer. Her eyes were locked on the man lying in the bed. Park Seo-yun. She saw his pale face, the dry lips, the tubes running from his body. She did not see a powerful man or a feared leader. She saw someone dying. She took a step forward. "Stop!" one of the nurses shouted, moving into her path. Mara turned sideways and slipped past her with surprising speed. Her shoes squeaked against the polished floor as she ran toward the bed. Security voices echoed from the hallway. Footsteps rushed closer. At the foot of the bed, Park Dae-hyuk spun around. His calm expression shattered. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. "Security." He stepped forward, anger rising in his voice. "Who let her in? Get her out of here now." Mara was almost at the bedside. Two nurses tried to grab her arms, but she twisted away. She moved with a wild urgency, driven by something deeper than fear. "Ma'am, you need to stop," one nurse pleaded. "You're contaminating a sterile environment." Dae-hyuk pointed at her sharply. "She's an intruder. Remove her immediately." Mara reached the bed. She did not hesitate. With shaking hands she unscrewed the cap of the plastic bottle. The sound of the cap clicking loose was loud in the silent room. Too loud. "No, don't," someone shouted. But it was too late. Mara leaned over Seo-yun. She placed one hand behind his head, lifting it gently. Her touch was careful, almost tender. Then she tilted the bottle and poured the water into his mouth. A thin stream flowed past his dry lips. Dae-hyuk shouted in panic. "Stop her. Now." Security burst into the room. Two large guards rushed forward. One grabbed Mara's arm. Another reached for the bottle. The water spilled across Seo-yun's lips and chin. Some of it soaked into the sheets. Some of it disappeared into his mouth. Mara kept pouring until the bottle was nearly empty. Then she was pulled back hard. The bottle was torn from her hand and thrown across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, water spreading across the clean surface. Mara did not fight as the guards restrained her. Her chest rose and fell fast as she struggled to breathe. Her eyes never left Seo-yun's face. The room exploded into chaos. One nurse shouted orders. Another rushed to the monitors. A doctor moved forward, checking Seo-yun's airway and vitals. "What did she give him?" someone demanded. "We don't know," another voice answered. Dae-hyuk stood frozen for a moment, staring at the water on the floor, his face tight with fury. "You've ruined everything," he said coldly. "Get her out." The guards dragged Mara away from the bed. Her feet slid on the floor as she was pulled back toward the door. As they moved her, she finally spoke. "He needed it," she whispered. No one listened. The door slammed shut behind her. Inside the suite, the medical team worked fast. Machines were checked. Readings were watched closely. One nurse leaned close to the monitor, her brow slowly furrowing. "Doctor," she said carefully, "look at this." The heart monitor showed something strange. Seo-yun's heartbeat, which had been uneven and weak, was slowing into a steadier rhythm. The sharp spikes and sudden drops were smoothing out. His breathing became more regular. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a miracle. But it was different. "Is that right?" another nurse asked quietly. The doctor stared at the screen. "It shouldn't be." Seo-yun's blood pressure stopped falling. His oxygen levels steadied. Dae-hyuk stepped closer, his face pale now. "What's happening?" The doctor did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the numbers. "I don't know," he said finally. "But his vitals are stabilizing." The room fell into a stunned silence. Seo-yun lay still, unaware of the storm around him. His chest rose and fell with a little less effort than before. Outside, Mara was being dragged down the hallway, her wrists held tight by security. She did not cry. She did not scream. She had done what she came to do. Behind her, in the sealed ICU, the dying king was no longer slipping as fast toward death. The basement security office of Helios Medical Spire was nothing like the quiet luxury of the upper floors. There were no soft lights. No filtered air. No comfort. The room was small and windowless, painted a dull gray that seemed to drain color from everything inside it. The smell of industrial cleaner hung in the air, sharp and unpleasant. A single metal table sat in the center, flanked by two hard plastic chairs. A security camera blinked red in the corner. Mara sat alone on one of the chairs. Her hands rested in her lap. Her shoulders slumped as the rush of adrenaline drained from her body, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. Dirt still clung to the hem of her dress. Her breathing had finally slowed, but her heart still beat hard in her chest. The door opened. Park Dae-hyuk stepped inside. He looked composed again. Calm. Controlled. The fury he had shown in the ICU was gone, replaced by a smooth, polite expression that was far more unsettling. His suit was perfect, his posture relaxed, as if he were here for a casual conversation rather than an interrogation. Two guards remained by the door. Dae-hyuk sat across from Mara and folded his hands neatly on the table. "Let's start over," he said softly. "Who sent you?" Mara did not look up. "I'm asking you a question," he continued, his voice still calm. "You don't just walk into a sealed ICU by accident. Someone helped you." She shook her head slightly. "No one sent me." Dae-hyuk sighed as if disappointed. "You broke through multiple security points. You carried an unknown substance into a sterile medical environment. That tells me intent." He leaned back in his chair. "The Iron Meridian Syndicate has been watching my cousin's condition closely. This wouldn't be the first time they tried something desperate." Mara finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired but steady. "I don't know what that is," she said. Dae-hyuk smiled thinly. "Of course you don't." He leaned forward now, resting his elbows on the table. "Poison doesn't always work quickly. Sometimes it takes days. Sometimes it looks like illness. And sometimes," he added, lowering his voice, "the final step is sending someone in to finish the job." Mara's brow furrowed. "Finish what?" "My cousin," he replied. "Park Seo-yun." Her lips parted slightly in shock. "I wasn't trying to hurt him." Dae-hyuk's eyes hardened. "You poured an unknown liquid into a dying man's mouth." "He was thirsty," Mara said simply. The words hung in the air. For a moment, Dae-hyuk stared at her as if he hadn't heard correctly. "Thirsty?" he repeated, incredulous. "Yes," she said. Her voice did not shake. His lips were dry. He looked like he needed water. Dae-hyuk laughed. It was a short, cold sound with no humor in it. "My cousin is connected to machines that manage his hydration perfectly. You think $1 billion medical suite forgot to give him water?" Mara clenched her hands together. "I don't care about machines. I saw him." "You saw what you wanted to see," Dae-hyuk snapped. He stood up slowly and walked around the table, stopping behind her chair. His voice lowered, closer now. More dangerous. "You are either very stupid," he said quietly, "or very well trained." Mara did not respond. Dae-hyuk straightened and stepped back toward the door. "Bring the officers." Within minutes, 2 uniformed police officers entered the room. Their faces were neutral, their movements practiced. Dae-hyuk addressed them calmly. "This woman illegally entered a restricted medical unit, assaulted medical staff, and administered an unknown substance to a critically ill patient. We believe this may be connected to an organized crime attempt on my cousin's life." The officers nodded. Mara stood as they approached her. Cold metal cuffs closed around her wrists. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault and attempted murder," one officer said. The words felt heavy, unreal. Mara did not cry. She did not argue. She only looked at Dae-hyuk as they led her toward the door. There was no fear in her eyes. Only a strange, quiet certainty. As she was taken away, the door closed behind her with a loud, final sound. Far above the basement, in the executive critical care suite, Park Seo-yun lay unconscious. Machines continued their steady rhythm. A nurse adjusted his drip and leaned close, checking his face for any sign of change. His breathing was calm. His body was still. Then his lips moved. The sound was barely audible. A breath more than a word. The nurse leaned closer. Seo-yun whispered something again, dry and faint. A name. Haejin. The nurse froze, unsure if she had heard correctly. She wrote it down anyway, marking it as a weak vocalization from an unconscious patient. Seo-yun drifted back into silence. Below ground, Mara was being processed into the system, labeled a criminal. Above ground, the dying king had spoken the first clue to the truth. Nurse Evelyn Brooks had worked in critical care for more than 20 years. She trusted machines, charts, and patterns. When something changed even slightly, she noticed. She stood beside Park Seo-yun's bed, checking the monitors as she had done countless times before. At first glance, everything looked the same. The machines hummed softly. Numbers scrolled across the screens. The room remained quiet. Then she frowned. Seo-Yun's heart rate was still weak, but it was no longer jumping wildly. The sharp spikes that had filled the screen earlier were gone. His breathing pattern had smoothed. His oxygen levels, which had been slowly dropping for hours, had stopped falling. It was not improvement. But it was not decline either. It was steady. Evelyn checked the time stamp and compared it to earlier readings. The change had begun shortly after the intrusion in the ICU. After the water. She felt a chill move through her. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured. She rechecked the leads, adjusted the sensors, and confirmed the readings. Everything was correct. Seo-Yun's body, which had been collapsing cell by cell, had paused. Across the hall, Dr. Nathan Caldwell reviewed the same data on his tablet. He had expected to see damage. Infection. Something to explain why an unknown liquid had been poured into his patient's mouth. Instead, he saw stabilization. Caldwell was a man of science. He did not believe in miracles. He believed in causes and effects, in chemistry and biology, in things that could be tested and proven. This was a variable. And variables demanded answers. The plastic bottle sat sealed inside an evidence bag on his desk. It looked harmless. Ordinary. The kind of thing people threw away without a thought. Caldwell stared at it for a long moment. He knew the hospital's main laboratory would not work. Too many eyes. Too much influence. Any unusual result could be buried or dismissed. So he made a quiet decision. After his shift ended, he took the bottle with him and drove across the city to Westbridge Research Institute, a university lab run by an old colleague who valued curiosity more than politics. The analysis took hours. Caldwell waited in a small office while machines scanned the water at a molecular level. He expected contamination, bacteria, industrial waste. Instead, the results shocked him. The water contained an unusually high concentration of rare ionic minerals, selenium, zinc, and a form of lithium that almost never appeared naturally in that balance. The structure was stable, complex, and unlike anything produced by standard filtration or treatment. "It's not medicine," the biochemist said carefully, "but it's active. Very active." "What does it do?" Caldwell asked. The biochemist hesitated. "It binds to synthetic metallic compounds, pulls them out of cellular structures, acts like a natural detoxifier." Caldwell felt his stomach tighten. Synthetic metallic compounds. The kind found in engineered poisons. The conclusion formed slowly but clearly. Park Seo-Yun was not dying from a mysterious illness. He was being poisoned. Back at Helios Medical Spire, Caldwell reviewed Seo-Yun's history with new eyes. The slow decline. The symptoms that mimicked rare disease. The lack of response to treatment. It all fit. This was not random cellular failure. This was deliberate. When he shared his findings quietly with Nurse Evelyn Brooks, her face went pale. "That girl," Evelyn said slowly, "she didn't bring poison. She brought the opposite," Caldwell replied. Word of the anomaly did not stay hidden for long. Park Dae-hyuk noticed the shift almost immediately. Doctors were asking new questions. Tests were being repeated. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. The atmosphere around Seo-Yun's care had changed. Dae-hyuk did not like unpredictability. He called a private meeting with senior staff and reminded them firmly that Seo-Yun's condition was sensitive and confidential. He praised their professionalism. He stressed the importance of staying aligned. Behind closed doors he applied pressure. Certain test requests were delayed. Some files became difficult to access. A subtle message spread through the hospital. This case was not to be reinterpreted. Dae-hyuk framed the intrusion as a dangerous distraction. "The patient is dying," he said calmly. "We cannot allow reckless speculation to interfere with his care." But Caldwell refused to let the data go. The stabilization was real. The chemical analysis was real. And the timing was impossible to ignore. Seo-Yun had not improved because of treatment. He had improved because of the water. Dae-hyuk attempted to close the matter quickly. He encouraged staff to focus on comfort care. He discouraged further investigation. He spoke of dignity and peace. Caldwell heard something else in his words. Finality. By the end of the night, the truth was clear to Caldwell and Evelyn Brooks. This was no longer a medical mystery. It was a crime. And someone very powerful wanted it buried. The Metro Detention Complex was loud, cold, and crowded. Metal doors slammed day and night. Voices echoed through long concrete halls. The air smelled of sweat, disinfectant, and hopeless waiting. It was a place built to break people down, not to hear the truth. This was where Mara was taken. She was processed like everyone else. Her name was written down. Her belongings were removed. Her worn dress was exchanged for plain clothes that did not belong to her. The metal door of her holding cell closed with a heavy sound that settled deep in her chest. She sat on the narrow bench and folded her hands together. She did not understand the legal words that had been used against her. Aggravated assault. Attempted murder. They sounded unreal, like they belonged to someone else's life. All she knew was this: she had given a dying man water. And now she was locked away for it. Far across the city, Dr. Nathan Caldwell did not sleep. The chemical report from the water analysis lay open on his desk. He read it again and again, tracing the numbers with his eyes, making sure he had not imagined them. The data was solid. Clear. Impossible to ignore. The water neutralized synthetic metallic toxins. That meant poisoning. Which meant Mara had saved Seo Yun's life. And yet she was in a cell, facing prison. Caldwell knew he could not fight this alone. The hospital system was already tightening. Requests were being blocked. Conversations ended when certain people entered the room. The truth was being sealed away, just like Mara. He needed someone outside the system. That was when he hired Veronica Hale. Her office was small and cluttered, filled with files stacked high and coffee cups left half empty. She listened without interrupting as Caldwell explained everything. Mara's arrest, the water, the analysis, the stabilization. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied him carefully. "Doctor," she said, "what you're describing is dangerous." "I know," Caldwell replied. "But it's real." She reviewed the medical data slowly. Her expression changed as she read. Skepticism faded into sharp focus. "This isn't a defense," she said. "This is leverage." Within hours, Veronica Hale filed for an emergency hearing. The courtroom was quiet but tense. Wood-paneled walls rose high above the benches. The judge sat expressionless as both sides prepared to speak. Mara stood beside her lawyer, hands clasped in front of her. She looked small in the room, out of place among suits and legal language. The prosecution spoke first. They painted Mara as a threat. A drifter. A possible agent of organized crime. "This defendant illegally entered a restricted ICU," the prosecutor said. "She assaulted medical staff and administered an unknown substance to a critically ill patient. We believe she was acting on behalf of a criminal syndicate." The words echoed sharply. Mara stared straight ahead. Then Veronica Hale stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not dramatize. She simply placed evidence on the table. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "this man was dying. Every doctor agreed he had hours or days left. Then, at the exact moment my client gave him water, his condition stabilized." She presented charts. Timelines. Medical records. "And here," she continued, "is the chemical analysis of the water." A murmur spread through the courtroom. "The water contains rare mineral compounds that bind to synthetic metallic toxins," Veronica said. "In simple terms, it neutralizes poison." The prosecutor objected. "Speculation." "This is laboratory data," Veronica replied. "Not speculation." She turned slightly toward the judge. "My client is not a syndicate operative. She is the only person who knows the source of this water. And without it, the patient will likely die." The room fell silent. The judge looked down at the documents, then at Mara. "You're asking for release?" she asked. "No," Veronica said. "We are asking for a supervised medical furlough. 12 hours. Under guard. To locate the water source so the patient can receive treatment." The prosecutor argued flight risk. Danger. Precedent. Veronica countered with one simple truth. "If the water fails, bring her back. If it works, you will have prevented a wrongful death." The judge closed her eyes briefly. Then she spoke. "Furlough granted. 12 hours. 2 armed escorts. Direct transport only." Mara's breath caught in her chest. For the first time since her arrest, the truth had cracked the wall around her. The locked truth was beginning to come out. The van left the city before sunrise. Concrete buildings slowly gave way to empty factories, broken roads, and patches of land that looked forgotten by time. Inside the van, Mara sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Across from her sat Dr. Nathan Caldwell, his face tense, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Beside him was Nurse Evelyn Brooks, holding a cooler with empty sterile containers. 2 armed guards sat in the front seats, silent and watchful. "This place," Mara said softly after a long silence. "It's called Hagen Valley." The van turned off the main road onto a narrow dirt path. The ride became rough. Branches scraped against the sides. Weeds grew thick and wild, as if nature had tried to reclaim what humans had abandoned. When the van finally stopped, they stepped out into still air. Hagen Valley looked wounded. Broken buildings stood like skeletons. Old concrete slabs lay cracked and half buried in dirt. Rusted metal signs leaned at strange angles, their warnings faded and unreadable. Nothing here felt alive. "This used to be a village," Mara said. "People lived here. My grandmother did." She walked ahead with quiet certainty, pushing aside tall grass and thorny bushes. The others followed, careful not to lose sight of her. After several minutes she stopped. "There," she whispered. They stood before an old stone well, half-collapsed and almost invisible beneath piles of debris. Broken concrete, twisted metal and dark hardened sludge covered the opening. It did not look abandoned by accident. "This was done on purpose," Caldwell said, kneeling beside it. Evelyn picked up a rusted warning sign lying nearby. The words "danger," "contaminated" were barely visible. "This isn't official," she said. "No government mark. No date." Caldwell nodded. "Private sabotage." Together they began clearing the debris. The work was heavy and slow. Concrete scraped against stone. Their hands grew dirty and raw. The guards helped without speaking, lifting what they could. As more of the well was uncovered, the damage became clearer. "This wasn't neglect," Caldwell said. "Someone buried this place." Mara stared into the dark opening. "The water was always clear," she said. "Cold. Clean." They lowered a rope with a sterile container attached. When it came back up, the liquid inside was dark and cloudy. Evelyn's face tightened. "It's contaminated." "Yes," Caldwell said, examining it closely. "But the minerals may still be active." They lowered the container again. And again. Each time they collected only a small amount. "This isn't much," Evelyn said. "It has to be enough," Caldwell replied. As they worked, Caldwell checked property records on his phone. His expression changed. "The land," he said slowly. "It's owned by Corin Group." Evelyn looked up sharply. "Seo Yun's company?" "Yes," Caldwell said. "Which means someone had access. Authority." Mara's hands trembled. They buried it to hide it. The truth settled heavily among them. This place had been destroyed on purpose. They sealed the collected water carefully. It was far less than they needed, but time was running out. Caldwell's phone buzzed. His face went pale as he read the message. "They're moving to end treatment," he said. "We don't have time." They rushed back to the van. As the engine roared to life, the guards turned on the siren. The vehicle sped down the dirt path, bouncing violently as it returned to the road. Inside no one spoke. They all understood the same thing. The forgotten well had not only been buried in the ground, it had been buried in silence. And now they were racing against that silence to save a life. The executive critical care suite at Helios Medical Spire was locked down. Security guards stood at every entrance. The hallway was silent, tense, and heavy with authority. Inside the suite, machines continued their steady hum, unaware of the decision that had just been made. Park Dae-hyuk stood near the main console. In his hand was a signed document. A do not resuscitate order. It carried Park Seo-yun's name. It carried a forged approval. "This is enough," Dae-hyuk said calmly. "My cousin has suffered long enough. It's time to let him go peacefully." The attending staff hesitated. "He's still alive," one doctor said carefully. "His vitals." Dae-hyuk cut him off. "I am his closest family. I am acting in his best interest." The room fell quiet. Finally he gave the order. "Terminate life support." At that same moment the elevator doors slammed open down the hall. Dr. Nathan Caldwell ran forward, his coat unbuttoned, his face flushed with urgency. Nurse Evelyn Brooks was beside him, clutching a small cooler tightly to her chest. Mara followed close behind, her breath shallow, her eyes locked ahead. Security stepped into their path. "You can't be here," one guard said. Caldwell didn't slow down. "That order is illegal." The guard raised a hand. "We have instructions." Caldwell stopped abruptly and shouted down the hall, "Fire in the west wing." The guards turned their heads, just for a second. That was all the opening they needed. "Now!" Caldwell shouted. They ran. Footsteps thundered behind them as alarms began to echo. They reached the ICU door. It was locked. Evelyn swiped her access card. Denied. Inside, Dae-hyuk's voice carried through the door. "Proceed." Mara did not hesitate. She slammed her shoulder into the door. Once. Twice. On the third hit, the lock failed. The door burst open. Everyone inside froze. Dae-hyuk turned, his face dark with rage. "Get them out." But Evelyn was already at the monitors, stopping the shutdown sequence. Caldwell blocked the doctor who had been reaching for the controls. Mara rushed to Seo-yun's bedside. She opened the cooler, pulled out one of the sealed containers and removed the cap with shaking hands. She did not wait. She lifted Seo-yun's head and poured the murky water into his mouth. "Stop her!" Dae-hyuk shouted. Guards rushed forward and grabbed Mara, pulling her away as the last of the water spilled onto Seo-yun's lips. For a brief moment nothing happened. Dae-hyuk let out a short, cruel laugh. "You see? It's over." Then Seo-yun's fingers twitched. A sharp breath tore through his chest. The monitors screamed. Seo-yun gasped again, deeper this time, air filling his lungs on its own. His eyes fluttered, then opened. The room went silent. Seo-yun looked around slowly, confused at first. Then his gaze settled on Dae-hyuk. Recognition flashed across his face. His eyes hardened. With great effort, Seo-yun lifted his hand and pointed. "You," he rasped. Every camera in the room caught it. Because at that exact moment, the door opened again. Daniel Cross, investigative journalist, stepped inside with a cameraman behind him. The red recording light blinked on. Seo-yun's trembling finger remained fixed on his cousin. "It was you," he said hoarsely. Dae-hyuk stepped back, his calm finally shattered. The betrayal was no longer hidden. And the truth was now on record. The arrest happened quickly. Park Dae-hyuk did not leave Helios Medical Spire in handcuffs at first. He tried to speak. He tried to explain. He demanded lawyers and made phone calls that were no longer answered. But the evidence was already moving faster than his influence. Security escorted him away as investigators arrived. The forged DNR order was confirmed within hours. Digital records showed unauthorized access. Financial trails linked chemical purchases to shell companies tied directly to him. The truth, once exposed, unraveled fast. The poisoning was not accidental. It was planned. It was slow. And it was meant to look like illness. The conspiracy spread wider than anyone first imagined. The engineered toxin. The careful dosing. The attempt to end Seo-yun's life support before the antidote could be used. Every detail painted a clear picture of betrayal. By the end of the day, Park Dae-hyuk was formally arrested. There was no calm mask left. No loyal cousin. Only a man exposed. As the investigation unfolded, the charges against Mara collapsed just as quickly. Medical experts reviewed the data. Independent labs confirmed the water's properties. Timeline after timeline showed the same truth. Mara had not harmed Seo-yun. She had saved him. The charges of aggravated assault and attempted murder were dismissed. Her record was cleared. The cell door that had once locked her away opened, and she walked out into daylight without guards or chains. She did not celebrate. She simply breathed. Park Seo-yun's recovery was slow but real. With the toxin identified, doctors were able to remove what remained in his system. Each day, his strength returned in small steps. He spoke more. He ate. He walked with help. But the greatest change was not physical. It was inside him. When he was strong enough, Seo-yun called a press conference. Cameras filled the room. Reporters waited for the return of a powerful man. Instead, they saw someone different. He spoke openly about the poisoning. About betrayal. About how close he had come to dying without ever knowing why. "I built an empire," he said calmly, "and I forgot what it stood on." The Koran group changed overnight. Seo-yun ordered the dismantling of all illegal operations. Shadow businesses were shut down. Assets were sold. Contracts were ended. The empire that had once fed on silence and fear was stripped down piece by piece. Some called it madness. Seo-yun called it accountability. With the recovered funds, he announced the creation of a new foundation. One focused on environmental restoration and public health. Its first project was clear. Aegean Valley. Experts were brought in. Contaminated soil was removed. The buried well was carefully cleaned and restored. The land was declared protected, no longer for profit, no longer for exploitation. Green returned slowly. Grass grew. Trees were planted. Clean water flowed again. At the center of it all stood the stone well, the life spring that had been nearly erased. Seo-yun did not claim ownership of it. He gave that responsibility to Mara. She became the official custodian of the site. Not as a figure of power but as a guardian. Someone who understood the land, its history and its value beyond money. Mara stood beside the restored well on the day it reopened. The water was clear again, reflecting the sky above. The air felt lighter, peaceful. Xiaoyun joined her quietly. "You saved my life," he said. Mara shook her head. "The land did," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment. This story did not end with revenge. It ended with remembrance. Of what had been buried. Of what had been forgotten. Of what still mattered. The land remembered. And so did they. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.